We're honored that the Rockefeller Foundation would choose the Brooklyn Alliance for this grant, giving us the opportunity to highlight such important issues. A thank you to President Judith Roden, Associate Director Edwin Torres, Managing Director John Irons, and Associate Director Abigail Carlton, who's with us this morning. Thank you for your support. A round of applause for the Rockefeller Foundation. Now, we know you're here in downtown Brooklyn, but this is a citywide discussion. So let me give a special thank you to our partners who really we work together on so many issues. And I'm gonna acknowledge them. Lenny Caro, President, CEO of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce. Nancy Plager, President, CEO of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. Jack Friedman, President of the Queens Chamber of Commerce. Linda Barron, President, Staten Island Chamber of Commerce. Jennifer Brown, Executive Director, Flatiron Partnership and co-chair of the New York City Bid Association. And Rob Burns, President, East Midtown Partnership and co-chair of the New York City Bid Association. Give them a big round of applause. Now, St. Francis College, I think, has become the go-to place for everything Brooklyn. And we're thrilled that they're hosting us this morning. So a special thanks to Rob Oliva and his entire team, President Brendan Dugan, and let me welcome Provost Tim Houlihan, who would like to do a quick good morning for us. Tim?
Well, would like to is stretching it a bit, but. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to St. Francis. On behalf of President Dugan and the Board of Trustees, it's a great pleasure to have all of you here. And that's all the time that they allotted me. The time was actually 8:59 to 9:01, so I think I'm done. But you're very welcome. It's an exciting forum, and I see one of my students here, which is actually pretty good at the end of April. Everyone's very stressed out. Please be kind to them. And again, thank you all for coming.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So of course, our candidates, I have to tell you, I think you guys have participated in dozens and dozens and dozens of these, and they're all smiling, so that's a good thing. But I think they're excited to be in Brooklyn. That's really what it's about.
Yes.
So let me introduce them. Former City Councilman Sal Albanese. Public Advocate Bill de Blasio. City Comptroller John Liu. City Council Speaker Christine Quinn. Erik Salgado. And former City Comptroller Bill Thompson. Let's give them all a big round of applause. So we're in for a great morning, and now let me introduce today's moderator. I think everyone knows Dave Evans. He's been a political correspondent for ABC7 since 1999. He's covered all of the biggest political races in the city, state, and nation over that time. He's done 3 mayoral races. You can always see him at City Hall jumping right in front of everyone else, making sure he gets the quote. Right, everyone? Am I right?
Right.
With that, thank you again, everyone, and let me turn it over now to Dave Evans.
When Carlo asked me a couple of months ago to do this, I thought it was going to be 15 or 20 people. I thought, it's April, long time before the election. But it's nice to see a big crowd out here this morning. Moderator is, that term is used a little loosely here because I'm not going to be asking the questions. So just a few housekeeping rules here. The questions are going to come from the esteemed panel over here, all the different chambers. And I'm just going to be like the referee. I'll try to step away, and if things get a little dull, not that they would ever with this panel. It's boring.
What are you trying to say, Dave?
You said it. I didn't. I'll jump in and try to move things along a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to start with opening statements. Each candidate is going to have 3 minutes to make an opening statement. If you want to go less, you can take a minute, 90 seconds. And then we're going to go into the questions, and those, again, will come from the chamber heads across the way. So let's go ahead and get started if we could, and we'll just go ahead and go down the row here with opening statements.
Dave, where's the timekeeper?
There is no timekeeper. I'm going to be the timekeeper, so that's one of my...
Yeah. Clemente, raise your hand so they know you're the timekeeper.
All right.
Or I'll interrupt, and I'll, and this is the chamber debate, which means, and no questions about Anthony Weiner or the Nets and the Knicks or any of that kind of stuff. We're gonna stay on business,
But Dave, you're in Brooklyn, so everyone is a Nets fan.
I guess so. Despite last night, I'm sorry about last night. We'll get them on Thursday. Okay, so we're gonna start with Sal Albanese. Again, you get 3 minutes, but again, if you want to take less, go ahead. So Sal, opening.
Thank you, and it's great to be here. Want to congratulate the Chamber for this great forum. My name is Sal Albanese. I'm the only candidate in this race who has a record of independence, and I'm not accepting money from lobbyists or developers, and I'm committed to putting the people in charge of City Hall. Let me give you a little bit about my background. I came here as an immigrant at the age of 8. I grew up not far from here in Park Slope when it was a working class neighborhood. My mother raised us on a garment worker's salary. The schools, the libraries, the sports programs, all services that the city offered helped to elevate my family from the working class to the middle class. I'm running for mayor because I want to offer future generations of New Yorkers the same opportunities that I had, and I'm worried that the political class is letting them slip away. With your help, I think we can change that. I spent 11 years as a New York City public schools teacher, so I understand education from the ground up. And I have a plan that will address poverty, which is the root cause of our failing schools. We don't just have an education problem, we have a jobs problem. As a city council member, I passed the city's first living wage law, which impacted 70,000 workers and put $3 billion in their pockets. We paid many of those workers $12 an hour. Here we are in 2013. That was 1996 when I passed that bill. We're debating a $9 an hour minimum wage, which I think is tragic. New Yorkers deserve better. We have a lot of brain power here. We need to create jobs to pay the bills. We need to stop using small businesses as piggy banks. We need to give them room to grow. Many of them are operating under slim margins. We also have to be creative. I plan on incentivizing companies and businesses that hire unemployed New Yorkers. As part of that, we have to train people to fill these jobs. I want to work with CUNY to train these folks to fill these jobs and also attract new industries to the city. But those are long-term ideas. We need to put people to work right now. We need to invest in our infrastructure, protect our coastline. That will save money, create jobs, and save lives when the next storm hits. To accomplish any of this, we need a government that works for its citizens. Right now, we have an out-of-touch political class that spends more time at cocktail parties than they do listening to their constituents. My opponents are part of the problem. They play it safe. They offer, they don't offer many new ideas or any new ideas actually. I want to be a different kind of mayor. I want to be a mayor that makes decisions on the merits. I want to tell the truth, even when it's politically risky. I want to give regular people a voice in City Hall, and with your help and your votes, we can build a better New York.
Okay, thanks. You're right at 3 minutes. Good job.
Right on time.
Okay, Bill de Blasio, go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for moderating. Thanks to Carlo and Denise and the Brooklyn Chamber, all the chambers who have put this together, and of course the St. Francis. We saw something very sobering in the paper yesterday, a report from the Bloomberg administration that we now have 46% of New Yorkers in a recent study who are either at or near the poverty level. And this is the result of 5 years now of economic crisis affecting our country and our city. And I think we have to be very clear it's going to take a very different approach to reach people, given the depth of the problems we're facing, to create real opportunity and create some hope for folks in every neighborhood and every borough. I often talk about a tale of two cities we're living because it's quite evident that income disparity alone It is not only present, it is growing in this city. Literally, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and it's not sustainable. It's not good for any of us. It's not something that fits the values of New Yorkers, and it's not how we can build a strong economy and a strong city going forward. Now, within that reality, when you talk about Tale of Two Cities, one of the frames to look at is the way the current administration, particularly during its third term, has treated small business, which I think has been with a much tougher, less fair, more punitive approach than it's treated other elements of the business community. And you see a distinct difference between the way outer borough small businesses have been treated versus Manhattan businesses. I did a study 2 months ago looking at inspections and fines for small businesses all over the city based on data I could only get by suing the Bloomberg administration. And what we found was a clear borough bias. More inspections, more fines, disproportionately in the outer boroughs than Manhattan. This is hurting job creation, and it's hurting opportunity for people who, in so many cases, it is their business that is not only the livelihood for their family, it's the first entry point into the economy for so many New Yorkers, especially true in immigrant communities. And I want to note that no part of our city got hit harder by Bloomberg policies, particularly during the third term, anti-business policies, more than the immigrant community. So that's one of the crucial things to fix, to stop the fining and the harassment, to encourage job creation by calling off the dogs. Yes, there's a revenue implication, but as I've said, I think the way Mayor Bloomberg did it was a hidden tax, and a counterproductive hidden tax. But there's so many other things we have to do. The water rates, which I think have not only gotten out of control, have been done in a very arbitrary fashion, are hurting homeowner and business owner alike, again, particularly in the outer boroughs. And then there's a question of all the tools of government, our pension funds, how we can use them better to encourage economic
Bill, you might wanna
activity
wrap up.
and affordable housing. It's both what we do to lighten the burden on business and what we do to invest. If we used all of those tools, we can start to turn around our economic reality and create more broad-based opportunity in this city.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
John?
Thank you. Good morning, and I'm so delighted to be with all of you here today at St. Francis. I want to thank all of the chambers of commerces across the city. I think this discussion is one that needs to take place and should have taken place a long time ago. So great to see all of you here. These past few years have been perhaps the worst recession since the Great Depression. And people are hurting throughout the city, and particularly small businesses. I think there are a lot of claims that the Bloomberg administration has been pro-business. I think that depends on how you define business. If you are a mega corporation or on Wall Street, I think the administration's been pro-business. If you've had a mom and pop shop here in Brooklyn or another small business elsewhere in the city, I would say that most people would think that this administration has been anti-business. So it depends on how you define business. And I think that what we need to do is redefine the paradigm. The mayor often says, and many of us say as well, that small business is the backbone of the New York City economy. And yet, I don't think that our economic policies reflect that. For example, our tax code heavily favors big business in this city, and taxes and also fines and levies penalties on small businesses until there's no end. So we've got to change the way we allow businesses to do business in the city of New York. I've called for an overhaul of the tax code so that we get rid of some of the big corporate loopholes and instead give exemptions of the general corporation tax to small businesses all across the city. Have other big companies pay their fair share of the unincorporated business income tax, and give local neighborhood joints an exemption to those kinds of taxes. Because I believe that if we are able to put thousands of dollars in the hands of small business owners, these are entrepreneurs who are not likely just to take an extra vacation, but actually pump that money right back into their lives and livelihoods, and perhaps hire an additional person as their business grows. And if that happens even to a fraction of the a 250,000 small businesses across the city, We're then talking about job creation in the tens of thousands and not specifically concentrated in any neighborhoods or sectors, but spread all throughout the New York City economy with multiplier effects to be enjoyed by everybody. So I think the key to our economic recovery in the coming years is small business. And we've got to put our money where our mouths are and make sure that economic development dollars that are available from the city of New York should go to small businesses who actually have the chance to grow and succeed. We also have to do a better job of channeling the city's purchasing power. We're the biggest customer in town in terms of city government. And yet the contract opportunities are not available on a level playing field. I think the record with regard to minority and women-owned business enterprises has been appalling, has been dismal. We've got to break down some of these barriers that still
3 minutes.
that make it very difficult for people to get their foot in the door. So I look forward. Did you say that's 3 minutes already?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I thought you said there was an. Anyway, I'm excited to be here. I think we're going to talk about a lot of great issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave and Carlo and Denise and everybody from the Chambers and the Flatiron. Thank you very much for pulling today's forum together. I also want to take a moment to thank all of you for the partnership and the work you have done with us in the City Council since I've been Speaker. You know, it is true that the vast majority of businesses in the city of New York are small businesses, and therefore it's absolutely true that the backbone of our economy in the 5 boroughs are small businesses. And that's why it's been so great to partner with everyone in this room over the past 7.5 years, whether it was our trips to Albany to try to, where we haven't been successful yet, but we're going to keep working, with our trips to Albany, where when I'm mayor, we'll go up together again to push for tax changes so S-corps don't get double taxed anymore, a real hit to small businesses. Or our successful work to deepen the unincorporated business tax credit in the city to help more small businesses and to help freelancers, because today's freelancer is tomorrow's small business and the day after that's big business. Or the work you've all done with us on the regulatory review panel, where we've begun to take steps to reduce the over-fining and over-penaltying of small businesses. And I just want to say, just 2 weeks ago, we passed legislation that requires city agencies to report back to the council by this summer on what fines could be changed to warnings in the first time, and you can rest assured that the second we get that report, it will be turned into legislation, and all of those fines will become warnings when we pass legislation this fall. Or the work we all did together to create the new business acceleration team, which has reduced the startup times for small restaurants by 2 months, or adapting that model to a Sandy rehabilitation model for businesses. Now look, these are some of the successes that we've had. But even with those successes, there is so much more we need to do to make small businesses thrive in our city. We need to move fully away from using fines as a revenue generator. We need to recognize that the rules are there to keep public safety, health, and order, and that warnings are the way to start, not fining. We need to make changes in the letter grading system. We need to expand and staff up the new business acceleration team to other industries. We need to take the model of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which has, working with us in the council, has brought 2,000 new niche manufacturing jobs to Brooklyn during the recession. We can take that model to Sunset Park and other places and bring more jobs. We need to build on what we're doing with our study around a Brooklyn Tech Triangle to harness the small business potential of the tech sector to put people to work. We have all of the ingredients. We just really haven't had government focus on how to put them all together so the cake could really, or the bread or whatever the heck, could really rise to the greatest height here to put more New Yorkers to work. But what we have to do that is recognize that government needs to, at times, get out of the way, and at times get more involved to be helpful, to harness all of our resources to move us forward. And make no mistake, there's great potential right now, whether it's the Brooklyn Tech Triangle in Brooklyn, or the coming of Cornell and Technion and the potential that'll have for Queens, or the incubator network across the city we've created. So I want to thank you all for being great partners, and thank you all for believing so much in the city of New York that you own and work in small businesses.
Good morning. I want to thank the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to this forum. As you notice, I have been silent from many forums. My name is Reverend Erik Salgado. I'm not a career politician. I have been in business for all my life. I started in 1994 when I opened a bookstore with my spouse, Sonia. And we were able to grow up to a chain of store. We actually were part of the Sunset Park BIT organization. And we understand how hard it is to work since the morning into the night. And then at the end of the day, you're going to find out that when you go to look at your mail, you find a ticket or a summary from the city that is taking basically all the revenue that you, with a lot of work and a lot of effort, made during the day. We had to eliminate all summit revenue from the city budget, and we had to put it to a different funds and eliminate all quarters from all ticketing. If you get a violation, it should be because you violate the law and not because the city needs extra revenue. We have to make sure that we work together with all the small business owners. This is not something new. Sometimes I hear this other candidate talking about the over-ticketing, but this is not something new. This is happening all the time. We have to eliminate the unnecessary bureaucracy from the system and eliminate the unnecessary paperwork. I go to different restaurants, they talk about the different percent of the milk that if they find, they send an inspector and they find this, a different percent in the milk, they're gonna give you a fine. The other day, I was talking to another friend of mine that have a business, and because the curtain in the place was too long, he got a ticket. People are getting tickets for things that they not even know that is in place. We have to make sure that all the necessary city bureaucracy is accessible in the internet, and that is really in a simple language for all small business owners to understand. Sometimes when you go in business in this city, you get so much paperwork that you feel like you have to be a lawyer to understand all the rules. And you are there to sell and to make a living for your family, and sometimes it's almost impossible to do so, especially when you belong to a minority that you don't understand all the rules. People get fear and they hire lawyers and they spend so much money trying to fight the city. We have to make sure that we get an arbitration system fair for the small business owner, because sometimes when you get a violation, it's almost impossible to fight it. Sometimes I go to my either architect, or I go to my accountant, or I go to my lawyer, and he said, don't waste your time, just pay the ticket and keep working. And that's what we have been doing for the last 20 years, pay ticket and keep working. Right now, I think we have to make a change. We have to eliminate all city quotas so people don't feel the incentive to go out and give you a ticket. Last time I was in my business and they told me, I'm sorry, I know you're right, but I have to write it up because I started the violation already, so I had to finish it. That is unacceptable. We have to give a break to the people who are working so much in this city. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, last but not least on opening statements, Billy.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everybody. It is, everybody's awake. Good morning, everyone. It is great. Anytime I'm in Brooklyn, I'm still home. So it is great to be home this morning, and I've seen so many friends around the room. And let me thank Carlo and the Brooklyn Chamber, as well as all of our chambers of commerce and our BID for helping to co-sponsor this forum this morning. I think we all know that small business is the growth engine for the city of New York, but the reality is New York City doesn't treat it that way. When you talk to the small businesses all across the city of New York in each of the 5 boroughs, they will tell you they look at the city of New York almost as the enemy. Fines, fees, penalties, double taxation. New York City no longer looks at its small businesses as growth engines. They look at it as kind of economic engines, at least when it comes to hitting you with penalties and fines. It no longer is about safety. It is about it's about taxation. It's about revenue generation, and that's wrong. We need to change our focus in the city of New York. We need to look at our small businesses as that growth engine. We need to look across the city of New York in kind of a 5-borough growth opportunity, whether it's bringing back office space all across the city of New York or working with small businesses in true one-stop shops, working also to create pools of capital. It's nice to talk about small business growth. If we don't create and identify additional pools of capital to help those businesses grow, we're almost talking to ourselves. Local preference for businesses. I remember when New York City used to create, and when its contracts, local preference. We don't do that anymore. We've stopped doing that. That's a growth engine, an opportunity for small business and mid-sized business to do growth or to do business with the city of New York. Minority and women-owned businesses. I know that in one of John Liu's studies, he pointed, I think the city of New York does 3% with minority and women-owned businesses. The state of New York is attempting to do 20%. Why such a gap? New York City can do much, much, much better. As we look across, 43% of our small business growth these days is in immigrant growth. Yet and all, there's so many people, because of language barriers, don't have access to real information. We need to change that. If we're going to be serious about small business growth, those are some of the things we need to do. We need to coordinate and do a much better job. This network out there in workforce training that really isn't coordinated, and it's been that way for years. There's money out there, and there's an opportunity to work closer with small businesses, to create more real one-stop shops. It hasn't happened. It's this network that's out there that just isn't tied together. And small businesses, in so many ways, that's the economic ladder for people, whether they're working there or the owners, that ladder out of poverty. As we look at so many low-income earners across the city of New York, some of the rungs in those ladders have been taken out. And people aren't climbing up the ladder the way they used to. We need to do better in that area. So there is so much that needs to be done. New York City needs to, honestly, and its next mayor, and hopefully that person is me, needs to embrace its small businesses, needs to put policies in place, needs to listen to you. How do we make things better? How do we get it done?
Billy, if you can wrap up.
And how do we end our comments? Thank you, David Evans. It's great to be here this morning. Thank you.
I'm just looking at the clock, and I know that we want to make sure that we get every borough to get a question in here. So if you want to, it's fine with me if it's okay with everyone here. If you want to direct your question to one or two or several of the candidates, feel free. I mean, all of them can answer, but I'm just looking at the clock here. It's going to get. I just want every borough.
Got it. And I think we'll do our questions quick.
Yeah, what's the amount of time per answer you want to do?
Yeah, that's.
How much do you want to do per answer? How much time?
1 minute.
1 minute.
Or less.
Well, filibustering.
Wouldn't you say like 47 seconds or something different?
Sure you don't want yes/no answers?
That would be one. Yes. And let me just acknowledge a dear friend, David Greenfield, City Councilman and co-chair of the Brooklyn delegation. Dave, thank you for being here. Okay, I'm going to be quick. So we know New York City invests millions of dollars in job training programs across the city. I think we'd be curious to hear what your approach is going to be, whether it's going to be investing on actual job placement, job training, workforce development, and how would you look at doing that? So, Sal, you want to start?
Well, good question, Carl. I think that training is very important, but I would like to train our New York City residents for jobs that really exist. For example, the technology and engineering program at Cornell is a tremendous opportunity for the city to really enhance and diversify our economy. I'd like to, and there'll be a lot of private companies that this will drive, and I'd like to ask those companies, what kind of employees do you need? What skills do you need? And then I want to pay for the training by working with our community colleges. And the commitment is that we provide incentives for those startups, but they're going to they will hire the people that come out of these community colleges, which the city will pay for. And by the way, that's being done across the country. We're not using our community colleges in a way that enhances job opportunities for New Yorkers. So with all of this new business coming into the city, we can specifically train people for those jobs, and then those companies will have to hire those people. So the city will pay for that training. So that I want to specifically target those training programs to real jobs.
Well, just a quick point on the previous question and the answer on training. Look, I want to be very clear. The problem with the attacks on small business grew rapidly in the Bloomberg third term. So it wasn't the same. Yeah, fines have been around for a long time, but it became a very focused effort to get revenue the wrong way by taking it out of small business, particularly in the last 4 years. So you can thank Speaker Quinn and those who believed in giving Michael Bloomberg a third term by changing the term limits law for the fact that small business was under attack for this last 4 years, particularly in the outer boroughs. I don't think it's the same as it was earlier on. On the question of training, look, there is a place for it, but I have to be clear. I have, back in the time I was General Welfare Committee Chairman of the City Council, I reviewed a lot of city training programs and found a lot of them wanting, found that they weren't providing skills that were necessarily connected to the greatest needs in the labor market, and that the bang for the buck was often questionable. I think it gets to something that a lot of us talk about, but the questionable nature of economic development subsidies too, and which ones actually produce jobs with the taxpayers' money and which ones don't. So I would say training when there is proof that it fits the modern economy and it's a good use of taxpayer money. I think some of our current programs simply won't make that grade. One other point, career and technical education in our high schools. This is an area of great potential. Because I think we're not focusing those programs on the modern economy enough. I think that's an opportunity to do some real training when we have kids in a position to prepare them at the right time in their lives.
If we can, before we go to John, I'd like to hear from the speaker because he made a direct hit, I think, at you about extending the term limits, and then we'll come back to John. Speaker?
Sure. I mean, I think the public advocate's point is about challenges for small businesses. And look, it is easy for everyone to identify what the problem is. And I agree that small businesses have been too hard hit through fines and penalties. But I've done something about it, not just talked about it. If you look at what we've done in the council working with the chambers, we put a regulatory review panel together. We asked the chambers to tell us, and their businesses they work with, what was wrong. We came up with 14 recommendations. We've been implementing those, and we're moving forward with further implementation. We put in a fine penalty relief period that saved businesses and individuals up over $30 million. We created a business owner's bill of rights. We're retraining inspectors. Come the summer and the fall, we will move all of the first-time penalties that we can to warnings. We put a new business acceleration team in place. This isn't the overall solution. There's more that needs to be done, I'm clear. But these are tangible steps that you ask the chambers and other representatives, they'll tell you they have made things better. And that's what our job is about, fixing problems. And when I'm mayor, I will go even further in this area.
Speaker, my question here is, I think the inference from the public advocate is there was collusion between you and Bloomberg for a third term. Why did you do that? Why did you agree to give him a third term?
As I've said many times, I believed at that moment in time, given the very extreme, challenging economic times we were in, I hope we don't see those again, that it was appropriate to give the voters a choice of consistency or choice for change. The voters had that opportunity. Some elected officials stayed, some were not brought back. And I think this election and this forum is about what's going to happen now moving forward. And how do you know what's going to happen in the case today of small businesses? By what we have actually done for small businesses to date.
All right, thank you, Speaker. If we can now bounce back to John Liu.
The thought back then in 2008 was that because of the economy, we needed a financial genius that could get us out of the economic difficulties. And we have seen the genius in allowing 300,000 employees to now work without a contract that is going to leave us deep in the red by the end of this administration, based on its own past practices of giving retroactive pay increases. So I think we've got to take some of those claims with a grain of salt. I also think that if you go around the city and ask small businesses if they feel like they've gotten a break in any way these last 4 years, I dare you to find one small business owner in this city who will say that the city council got together with the mayor and made changes that made life easier for them to do business and to conduct their livelihoods on a regular basis. So let's call it things for what they are. This so-called pro-business administration has very much been anti-small business. On the issue of job training and workforce development, I think we still need to do a far better job with our schools our public schools. And the CUNY the CUNY colleges have been largely ignored in the whole workforce development policies. I think LaGuardia Community College has a very good program, but it's still limited in scope because they're not able to expand to serve more students and therefore channel them into the businesses that are growing here in the city of New York. We also have the opportunity, the potential to work closely with trades excuse me, with more labor unions, particularly the trades, to enhance their apprenticeship programs so that young people today can learn marketable skills that can be immediately used in the marketplace. This is an administration that got rid of employment, the Department of Employment. We used to have a Department of Employment in the city of New York. Mayor Bloomberg got rid of that and instead brought in all of these non-profit, sometimes for-profit
we're over a minute here if we can.
organizations to do job training, and yet we have seen some of these organizations fudge the numbers because of the incentives not being properly aligned with the public interest.
I think, Sean.
No, it's my turn again? Oh.
Yeah, I think we've already heard from the speaker on this.
Okay.
No, I didn't get to talk on job training. I got to respond to the
Okay,
other
if we
point.
can we keep it to 30 seconds here?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So the key thing about what's broken in our job training program is it doesn't target on the jobs that exist out there. We need to be in better contact with the small businesses and businesses in the city and stop training people for jobs that don't exist. We need to build on things like a program we created, New Skills, New Jobs, where the Department of Small Businesses subsidizes salaries for people for on-the-job training. That's really, really critical. We also need to target industries that have growth potential. Things like the Grocery Works program that we've put in place with the Department of Small Business Services that trains individuals for good jobs in the grocery industry. And everybody's right about the potential of the two-year colleges. That's why I'm so proud working with the General Assembly, the tech sector's business entity. We've put in place a program at the two-year colleges which will graduate its first class next month that teaches the General Assembly's curriculum, graduates folks with a degree or a certificate, if you will, that we know is going to be accepted by the tech sector because they wrote the curriculum. They've had each one of the students as interns in this program. So there are models out there. The comptroller's right. We need to make them bigger, but I'm proud that we in the council have created some that we can take to a fuller scale.
Thank you. Erik.
Once again, I've been in business for the last 24 years, all my productive life. And I believe we have to start with the training, with investing in more vocational school in the city. Most of these students, sometimes when they graduate from high school, they don't know where to go or to start a business themselves. And some of them, they have the talent to start to work in different businesses. So we have to concentrate in more vocational school, and then also we have to partner with the current community college that we have and give incentive to the business owner to hire those students that are graduating from the associate and from the bachelor program. We also have to bring the manufacturing industry back to New York City. Nothing is made in New York anymore. Everything is made in Taiwan, and not against John Liu. We have to make sure that even the T-shirt that say "I love New York" is made in Connecticut. We have to give incentive to bring the manufacturing industry back to New York. So we have to fight for a sales tax break in every item that is manufactured in New York City. And we're gonna make that slogan famous again, made in New York City, and I love New York City. We have to bring the manufacturing industry back to New York so we could create jobs for our student, for our college student, and for our vocational student as well. Thank you.
Billy?
Do I get 30 seconds for that?
I don't think you want 30 seconds. Go ahead, Billy.
You know, the first thing, Dave, and I can't the public advocate raised an issue and the speaker answered, and I can't allow it to go unresponded to at the very least. To talk about extending and creating a third term, undermining the will of New Yorkers because of the economy. in all due respect, we change presidents in the middle of wars. We don't change the Constitution to go back and say, let's give somebody a third term because the economy's bad or because, because the sky, because it's cloudy today. It was wrong. Let's just acknowledge that this bad third term that we're living right now, the excessive number of penalties, And Bill de Blasio is right. Those penalties and fines have accelerated in the third term. They are backdoor taxes, and that's exactly what the Bloomberg administration is doing. And to be honest about it, Speaker, we have you to thank for that third term. So that is wrong. When it comes to career and when we look at workforce development, it shouldn't just be a question of placement. It should be a question of retention. We need to match the skills up against the jobs that exist, but we also have to make sure that it's not just placement, it is retention. The public schools need to do a better job when it comes to training and comes to education, because what's happening now are community colleges, which should be help to prepare for job readiness. They're focused on on remediation, because the public school system isn't doing the job it's supposed to do.
Bill, we're over. We're at a minute and a half right now. So if we can move along, Lynn, if you want to go ahead and ask the question, if you want to direct it at any candidate.
Great, I will. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I just want to let you know I got stopped at the Brooklyn Bridge for my passport because I came from the Bronx, but they allowed me in.
But you got through Manhattan, Lenny.
They didn't stop me there. They only got me over the bridge. I don't think anybody would disagree that small businesses built this city. Over the years, this is the backbone of it. But I think we've lacked to understand what it really means to bring back manufacturing. We've lost so many manufacturing plants throughout the city of New York that I think whichever candidate makes to become this mayor, I think that's an important issue. And it was a good point that he brought up about the T-shirts being made in Connecticut. I think it's important that we have the ability to do manufacturing. We have the property, we have the talent, we have the ability to do that. So, Tom, Bill, I'd like you to take that lead and come up with your answer.
Well, I think in looking to grow, and first, some of this is to protect the manufacturing that is still here. And I think that's important that we wind up doing that, working hard to make sure that we create synergies that you create in some of the industrial parks and other places, an opportunity to maintain manufacturing. But I also think it is looking at where's the possible manufacturing in the future. We talk about a greener, more sustainable city. It's a great opportunity as we look to create sustainability in the city, to retrofit, to have a greener New York. We import all those materials right now. It's a great opportunity to be able to grow manufacturing in New York City and have New York City as a more sustainable city also. They kind of go together. And at that point, we can start, we can look to export, our manufacturing things from New York City to other places around the country. So it is first in looking to protect the manufacturing that we have now, and then also look where can we grow manufacturing, and making sure that in some cases we provide the incentives to be able to get that done. So it's a combination of things, but manufacturing needs to be back on the table, as they would say, because it hasn't been in so long.
Bill, if we can, go ahead and jump over here to Sal, because you said you wanted to say something about it.
I want to say
Yeah,
something about it too.
I
All right,
just
if
want.
everybody talks on this, then that means when there's a really juicy thing,
This is
be careful.
juicy.
Be careful
This
what
is-
you
this
want
is-
to talk about, okay?
this is juicy.
Because I'll remember. I'm going to track you.
I just
juicy.
want to generally make a point here, and I've been in the private sector for the last 15 years, and one of the things I've noticed over that period of time as I come back into the public arena is that there's a lack of trust between the city and small businesses. They've been totally ignored for years now, and it's getting worse and worse as I meet with small businesses around the city. We have to rebuild that trust, and all of these ideas are great, but there's got to be a feeling of confidence that the city really cares about small business, and I plan on doing that with my economic development agency. In terms of manufacturing, I've got some great ideas to use the city's tremendous contracting power to create jobs here in the city. For example, why can't we build our subway cars and our buses here in New York City? We have the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We have the Sunnyside Yard. We have Hunts Point. There's lots of places where we can do that. It's billions of dollars. And Philadelphia is beginning to do that now. Yonkers is beginning to do that as part of the contracting out process, which the city does in huge numbers. Our economy is as large as some big countries. We should use that leverage and say, you want a contract.
We need to move along.
Well, that's a proposal which would create tens of thousands of living wage jobs.
Okay, John, I think you raised your hand next.
Yeah, I think that the decline of the manufacturing base in New York City is real, very real, for decades now. But it hasn't all disappeared. In fact, there are some instances of new manufacturing and new industry coming into New York City. The problem is that the city has made it so difficult for them to even locate here or expand. So I've got an example in College Point where, believe it or not, we've got an aerospace manufacturing plant in College Point. They employ 300 people. They want to grow, but the Economic Development Corporation will not even entertain their proposals. They won't give them the light of day. So we've got the EDC making decisions on a very small percentage of the applicants for assistance, and yet companies like this aerospace company in College Point will not get the light of day. That's a problem that we have to fix in the city of New York. We've got to get rid of these special favors given only to politically connected companies that then get the subsidies. The other thing is we had opportunities to bring hundreds of manufacturing jobs to New York City. There's a car manufacturer that offered to build all the taxis that we need in the city of New York, right here in Brooklyn. And for some reason, this administration did not even seriously entertain that proposal when instead of importing the cars from overseas, we could have made tens of thousands of vehicles right here, creating something like 600 jobs immediately.
Thanks, John. If we can, with Bill right here.
Yeah, first, I can't ignore Speaker Quinn's tortured logic that she gave Mayor Bloomberg a third term, then he did bad things to small business, then she quote-unquote did something about it. I want to use a phrase from retail, Speaker Quinn, you broke it, you own it. So, he wouldn't have the opportunity to have done what he did to small business if you hadn't helped him to have his third term. Look, on the question of manufacturing, I agree with John. Taxi Tomorrow is an example where the city's policies did not focus on job creation and certainly didn't focus on the manufacturing potential. So we literally offered a $1 billion franchise to a corporation without any job guarantees in the process. I think the Bloomberg administration said early on they had a bias towards quote-unquote the high end of the economy. They had a bias towards luxury housing. They had a bias towards tech. Those are important pieces of the economy, but manufacturing still matters deeply, especially for living wage jobs for working people in the 5 boroughs. The Brooklyn Navy Yard is a great example of what you can do if you actually provide a little bit of support for manufacturing. So I think we need a realignment in the next term, a more balanced approach that doesn't just focus on Manhattan jobs or luxury jobs, but sees clean manufacturing as an important piece of the puzzle.
Thanks, Bill. Eric? Yes, Eric.
Yes, when I was in business, I used to manufacture a lot of things with my spouse, Sonia, and we was able to create a lot of things to sell over here in the city. But sometimes you find yourself fighting with companies that are based in many other places where they don't pay workers' compensation, they don't pay all the things that we have to pay over here in New York City. And I saw with my eyes everything vanish right in front of me because you could get everything through the internet. If we give at least real estate taxes break to manufacturers to come back to the city, and we allow them to have different incentive to be also over here and create job, is going to be different for the local manufacturers to compete in the market, especially with the internet revolution that we have right now. And also, all city contract should be given to companies that are based in New York and not to outsiders. We have to give preference to the people who are here. They are the ones who are paying the taxes and the ones who are making our governor work and function. So they should have preference when it comes to city contract. It should go to local companies. Thank you.
Speaker Quinn.
Thank you. And this is a juicy question, Dave, just for the record.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, we have the real potential to build more manufacturing jobs in the city. We should take the structure we did at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where we bought 3,000 new manufacturing jobs during the recession, apply that in Sunset Park to the yards there. We should seize the opportunity of the manufacturing spaces that aren't being used in the South Bronx and come up with incentives for doing greening and cleaning of trucks that have to be greened and cleaned because of the federal regulations. We should build on what we've done in the council, the $10 million Small Manufacturing Investment Fund. We're working with groups like Vidco and others in Brooklyn. We take big manufacturing structures and subdivide them to smaller niche manufacturing, which has really created jobs, or continue our work creating incubators all across the city. This is a real way to grow more manufacturing out there, and also to keep what we have, we need to keep the funding for the IBZs in place. They've done a terrific job supporting manufacturing. We can't step away from that. And in this instance, and in the instances of small business regulations, it isn't about tortured logic. It's about seeing a problem, identifying a solution, and implementing it, not just criticizing.
Thank you, Speaker. We're going to go to Manhattan. And Nancy, I don't know if you want to ask the first question, but I love your second question about the bike lanes.
Well, I was just going to do that, because I think I'm going to put words in all of your mouths. I think that you would agree with us that for the small business community, that there's overburdensome regulations, and that no matter which one of you become mayor, that you would continue to work with our chambers and our bids and our other organizations to continue regulatory reform, and also enact ways to measure the success of these reforms. I think that's really critical, because we have all these great reforms in place, but we don't have any measurement, and the only real measurement would be the reduction in fines. But we need other measurements as well. So that was my first question, skipping over that. The second question is, and this is particular to Manhattan and now even more to Brooklyn and certainly to the other boroughs, is the bike lanes. Manhattan has become overrun with bike lanes. We've now put in the great bike program, which no one thinks is bad at all, but it's really, for many small businesses, they have a lot of issues because of the inability to have deliveries, the inability for people to just walk in their door and not be afraid to be hit by a bike, because as you know, many Manhattanites do not walk at the crosswalk. They are jaywalkers. Anyway, so I really want to know what your stance is on how, in particular in Manhattan, to help our traffic issue, and also, do you agree with the proliferation of the bike lanes? Not of the bike program, because we all love that, but so many bike lanes, which is interfering in many cases with the ability of small businesses to attract their customers.
Nancy, do you want to hear from all the candidates on this one?
Why not?
Okay, let's start with Billy Thompson then.
Okay. Look, I think that from the beginning, bike lanes were done without discussion with local communities and with local businesses, and have said for years that that should have occurred. That both community boards and businesses, I think in one of the great examples I saw in Little Italy years ago, there's a protected bike lane that, and with parking also, to be able to make a delivery, traffic has to be backed up. So that any truck can stop and make delivery. No one spoke to the local business before they put the bike lane in. I think it's important that in a number of places, there's some communities that want more bike lanes, there's some that want fewer. We need to talk to those communities and the businesses in those communities and work along with them to right-size exactly what we're doing. So in some areas, they want more bike lanes. In others, they want fewer. If we don't speak to the business community, if we don't talk to local community boards and others, we're not going to get it right. That's what we need to do. My transportation commissioner will definitely do that.
Okay, Erik, go ahead.
In congestion area, we have to eliminate the bike lane. It's unacceptable. If you don't have space for the car, you cannot function, and I know how hard it is to be in business and not be able to function. And we also have to make sure that all commercial vehicles that are making delivery, they have actually a driver and a delivery person, because they are also one of the cause of the mass traffic congestion in downtown Manhattan. There must be two workers, the driver and the person who makes the delivery. So the driver will be at the all time available to move the car in case it's making a congestion. And definitely the bike lane have to be eliminated in the congestion area of Manhattan. Also, we have to create a parking spot for in a couple block for a green car, so people will feel the incentive to buy a green car and make sure that they have a spot in the city. So that's how we could promote a safer and a green area in Manhattan. We had to provide parking spot for those vehicles so we could move forward.
Christine?
I think Comptroller Thompson hit it on the head. It's about consulting with communities. And that's why we in the council passed legislation requiring that the Department of Transportation consult with community boards before they cite a bike lane, in the same kind of a way that there has to be community board consultation around sidewalk cafes. A little different because that's land use, but that was really important, because what we were hearing was some communities saying we want more. Some communities like Community Board 4 in my district that loves bike lanes, but wasn't told there was going to be one on 9th Avenue, which just angered them, understandably. Or other communities saying, we're okay if it's here, but we're not okay if it's here, and there not being that ability to have the conversation. And that's why that law, and our chair of our Transportation Committee, Jimmy Vaca, deserves a lot of credit for it, really instituted that, so that consultation, even if whoever the mayor is, I believe we would all require that, but whoever the mayor is, that consultation is now required, which I think has helped improve and calm things down. But that's the key. You can't be implementing these without talking to the community boards, and I'm glad with Jimmy's leadership we were able to do that.
Bikers for a long time were neglected by the city of New York, so it was the right thing to do to give them some more resources and give them a fairer share of the street space. And that's true in many parts of Manhattan. But again, here the one-size-fits-all approach that extends across all boroughs is not working. There are many parts of Brooklyn and Queens and I dare say Staten Island and Bronx as well, but I know for sure in Brooklyn and Queens, where there are huge stretches of bike lanes, and you could stand there for hours and there are no bikes. And meanwhile, there are, business owners, there are residences who are, ripping their hair out because of the frustration that their parking spaces have been taken away, or their ability to load and unload has been severely impaired. And yet, there are no bikes on these bike lanes that go on for hours.
John. Bill?
Yeah, look, it's in our interest to keep expanding the use of bike lanes the right way. When we get people to utilize bikes, whether it's for commuting or for other things they're doing in their life, and get cars off the streets in the process, that's good for all of us. I think the fault line is not just a lack of clear consultation with community boards. I think community boards play a very powerful role, but I think it's a lack of clear consultation directly with the small businesses affected and with neighborhood residents. I can say I've seen plenty of examples where community boards were fully in the loop, but a huge percentage of people in the community didn't know what's going on, and certainly small business owners found real specific negative impacts on them, like the delivery problem or the parking problem for customers, that could have been fixed in the beginning with a different design or a different approach or changing the exact location of the bike lane. So I think it is a deeper, more truly consultative type of outreach, heavy focus on small business, because given the hell that small business has been put through in the third Bloomberg term, we need to be very, very careful in how we change the environment around them in the area of bike lanes. But if we do that right, I think we can continue then to properly expand bike lanes for the good of us all.
Thank you, Bill. Sal?
All decisions like bike lanes and others, obviously you need community input. I've released a mass transit plan, the only candidate who's done that, which includes the expansion of bike lanes, properly built, so that we can improve our air quality. One of the things that we want to do is get people out of their cars, and that's important for business as well. In order to move people around the city, you have to have an adequate mass transit system. So I want to organize mayors for mass transit, use the bully pulpit of the mayor's office to organize proper funding for our mass transit system because it's essential to the city's economy. I mean, the partnership points this out. If we can't move people around efficiently, if we don't have decent air quality, it's going to impact small business, it's going to impact business in general. So we got to look at this holistically. Bike lanes can make a difference. I'd like to see a bike lane expansion from Bay Ridge to Staten Island using the Verrazano Bridge. Let's build one there. So, and also, the point is well taken about enforcement. There is no traffic enforcement out there. We need to have the police. We have a unit that works on making sure that
right, Sal.
cyclists obey traffic laws, and we won't have those injuries that we have out there right
Thanks,
now.
Sal. If we can, we're going to go to a question now from Queens, I think about rebuilding.
Yeah, we're going to make a very quick question about Hurricane Sandy. Many communities are still devastated from the hurricane, still struggling. What are your immediate plans to address the infrastructure and transportation needs that we have in places, especially like the Rockaways?
Okay, and Jack, do you want that question to everyone, or are you directing that to someone specifically?
For purpose of brevity, if somebody's already said it, just agree and move on.
That's likely.
Thanks, Jack.
That's good.
Okay, we're going to start in the middle of the table here with the council speaker. Christine, if you want to start.
Sure. Well, it's a big question. So a couple of different things. I mean, one, we have to overall move forward with a plan to hardening the exteriors of New York City, which means in some places man-made barriers, in many other places a comprehensive network of natural barriers. Two, we need to identify all of the systems, which we know now that failed during the storm, and build in redundancy. Certainly one of those was in the mass transit area. One of the first type of mass transit that was back up and running after the storm was the East River Ferry. That's just another bit of evidence, in my opinion, that is going to really push us to expand ferry service across the city and be prepared to use ferries in an adaptive way in the times of natural disasters. Two, bus service obviously was easier to get back up and running than subways were, which is just another reason to move forward with the plan I've put out there to have 10 additional bus rapid transit lines across the city. Now, we also need to recognize the other systems that failed that hurt small businesses, like power. 50% of New Yorkers who were out without power got their power from overhead lines, even though only 15% of New Yorkers get their power from overhead lines. We need to move forward, and we've passed legislation that started that, to put those power lines underground. We also need to continue our focus on small businesses. We need to keep pushing to expand loans, not grants, because grants are just too hard for small businesses to pay back. And I want to thank all the chambers for partnering with us in the council on our interactive website with Yelp to identifying when small businesses are opening.
Okay, thank you. Let's bounce here, Bill de Blasio.
Yeah, I agree a lot with a lot of the frame that Speaker Quinn just laid out, but I want to say, look, I think that the fact is that we know these storms will be a part of our lives going forward. I don't think necessarily the sheer magnitude of Sandy, but storms will be a regular part of our lives. We have to take substantial action. The federal aid coming in hopefully will cover a lot of the hardening of the transit assets, since we're the first rung of what we have to do. But I think thereafter, the powerful part here is that we have an opportunity to address some of the core challenges we're facing, and I talked about that 46% of folks who are at or near the poverty level. We have an opportunity to create employment while solving our structural environmental problem in areas like wetlands restoration, in areas like creating more solar and wind power placement here in the city. That's another way that we withstand the effects of any impact on our power grid, is more energy generation within the city. That is cleaner as well, but has real job creation possibilities. And then a lot of what we need to do in terms of zoning and building code, it will take work. But let's be clear, the notion of moving generators from the basement to the upper floors, or the notion of changing some of the approach to building in coastal areas, these are things we have great models for around the world. So I do hope that we proceed with an attitude of optimism and resilience that is typical of our city, in recognizing that we can address these challenges.
Thank you, Bill. Sal, go ahead.
Well, Jack, Sandy showed a cataclysmic failure of our government structure, because for 10 years, we've been warned about this kind of storm. There were no hearings held. None of these people that have been in office, the taxpayers have been subsidizing for years, did anything about preparing for a storm like Sandy, when, as I said, we've been warned 6 weeks before Sandy hit. There was an article on the front page of the New York Times highlighting exactly what was going to happen if a storm like Sandy hit, and of course it happened. And now, in a crisis, we have a crisis-oriented government. We have to be proactive and think ahead. And the people in the Rockaways are cynical, and I can't blame them. They were abandoned before the storm, and still feel abandoned now. Small businesses don't know if they're going to survive the summer because there's no transportation out there. Peninsula Hospital closed. There's only one hospital out there, St. John's, which is full of people who have been injured during the Sandy storm. So we have to point out that we have a cataclysmic failure of our government, and it's too reactive, and we got to start thinking ahead because other storms are going to strike us going forward. And on day one, I'm going to be a proactive mayor, and not think about the next 2 weeks, but for the next 100 years, if we're going to have a sustainable city.
All right, thanks, Sal.
Jack, look, quickly, because I know we're racing along here, I think that there are a few things. Number one, there is money coming in from the federal government. We have to make sure that that money is used well and coordinated and done in very staged fashion, but also coordinated with dollars from the city, the private sector as well as utilities. I've recommended that we have a deputy mayor for infrastructure. I think that makes a lot of sense. But as we look forward to making sure that in Queens, and we talk about transportation, not just transportation that's broken down, but the need for additional transportation, both from Queens into Manhattan, but also from Queens within Queens, because the structure there and the system isn't that good. I've recommended at least raising dollars for mass transit in two ways: one through restoration of a commuter tax directed or entirely at mass transit, as well as a fee-based or as well as registration increase based on weight of vehicles. Those together generate somewhere between $1.7 and $2 billion. If you start to put that together, we start to improve a mass transit system and make it more resilient and make it work for everybody.
Thank you.
Since Sandy's,
Do you want to go ahead? Let's go with John.
okay.
Just very quickly, I think the power and electrical infrastructure is really job one. For too long, the small businesses were, even if they wanted to open, they could not open. They couldn't even clean up because they didn't have any power. And you look at the immediate aftermath of Superstorm Sandy, there was a huge emphasis on getting Manhattan back online. They got everything, and the last thing they needed to get was cell phone signals, which was a huge priority, and yet people out in the Rockaways, residents and small businesses, were left out in the cold. So it's a matter of priority. It's also a matter of making sure that our power structure, our electrical grid is able to withstand these kinds of storms.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we have to make sure that we give incentive to the private sector and the builder to come and build in the area affected by Sandy. We don't have this kind of problem in Puerto Rico. They all prepare for this superstorm every year, and you see this big building by the shore. We have to give that incentive to the builder to come and build in the shores with the condition that they will provide 30% of those apartments for affordable housing, especially for the Sandy victim. Also, we cannot forget about Staten Island. Over 500,000 people live over there, and the old New Yorker as well. We have to make sure that they are not detached from the city, but they are connected to the city. I will not put a bike lane to the Verrazano, but I would definitely extend the R train to go all the way down to Staten Island and connect them to the city, and also help them to develop the beaches, so the rest of the New Yorker, when they go to Staten Island, is not just to pass through to go to New Jersey, but to stay and also participate with the beautiful resources that we have in Staten Island as well.
Thank you. On that note, let's hear from Staten Island. A question about
Perfect transition.
Well, I couldn't come to a citywide forum without speaking about tolls, so I've got the juicy question for everybody. Right. Continuous increases in bridge tolls are a strong concern for small businesses, especially since there is not a reduced commercial fare that would lower rates for vehicles that make repeated deliveries. While some bridges have tolls, others are free to cross. This puts businesses that do not have access to free bridges at a competitive disadvantage with their neighboring boroughs. What would you do? Would you support a plan that would toll the East River bridges while lowering the tolls in the rest of the boroughs? And what would you do to implement toll equity?
Well, you're talking to the only person who has a real plan. I have a mass transit plan which would add tolls to areas where there's a lot of mass transit options, reduce tolls where there are limited mass transit options. Under my plan, Staten Islanders would pay about $5, and we would apply technology so that during off-peak hours the tolls could even be low. We have that in place. My plan is very specific. You're going to hear my opponents here give you some hocus pocus. The bottom line is that we have the only plan that makes sense. Staten Islanders, as I've used this term before, crossing the Verrazano Bridge, coming from Brooklyn, it's like getting mugged without a gun. You're paying $15. It's the highest toll in America. It's bad for business. I pointed out at a previous forum, I bought an elliptical machine on Dick's Sporting Goods store on Highland Boulevard. I waited for the guy to come to my house in Bay Ridge to assemble it. He said to me he couldn't get there because he was already in Brooklyn once, and he couldn't pay the toll. He said it was too expensive. So it impacts commerce. Staten Island will never be economically viable unless we reduce that toll, which is outrageous that somebody has to pay $50 to cross a bridge.
Bill?
I think the whole question is equity and guarantees for people affected in each of these decisions. And I think in the past, when tolls were brought up, the problem was that there was no believable set of answers that the people who would be doing the tolling, who would be doing the paying, I should say, were going to get specific benefits back in return. So what I'd say in the case of Staten Island, there's no question this is a huge burden on Staten Islanders. I think as a question of how we make a decision where we go forward on tolling, whether we change it, whether we reduce it, there needs to be a study of the economic impact. It needs to happen quickly.
Come on, Bill.
To show, you can have your opinion, my friend.
I do.
To show what the real impact is of the tolls compared to other areas of the city, and make a decision based on that. Whether we have to go in a different course with Staten Island.
Okay, John?
I think that when it comes to transportation costs and amenities, that there has to be more equity. In most of the other boroughs, in all the other boroughs, there's a balance between the tolls and mass transit. Toll revenues are generally used for the most part to subsidize mass transit. Of course, that's not the case for Staten Islanders because there's very little mass transit as compared to the other tolls, the other boroughs. So I think that in terms of overall equity, more going forward, more of that toll revenue coming from the Staten Island Bridge, the Verrazano Narrows, should be used to operate more mass transit on the island. That's just a simple question of toll equity. As far as small businesses go, the tolls are very onerous on small businesses, but they're one of many forms of taxation that the city and the state levy on small businesses. And I don't know if it's just looking at the toll tax per se. We should be looking at the comprehensive package of taxes that small businesses are burdened with. And so, for example, earlier on I talked about how we can get rid of some of the general corporation tax for small businesses across the city.
Thank you,
So
John.
it's not just one tax, but let's look at the whole array.
Chris?
There is no question that the level of tolls has an impact on Staten Island residents and small businesses, as all of the above, and also the students, a lot of students, such great universities now on Staten Island. I think this all stems from the fact that 5 borough residents are really the economic engine, if you will, of the MTA. But on the board, we have the voice of a piston. We don't have any real power on the MTA board at all, and we are the real heart of the system. That's why I've called for the mayor to appoint directly the head of the New York City Transit Authority and the mayor to have the majority of the appointments on the MTA board, and for the rider, driver, user member of the board, so to speak, to have a vote, not just a ceremonial appointment. Now, this would need Albany legislation. We've gotten tougher things passed in Albany. This will give us a real voice on the MTA so we can then finally have a substantive discussion about resource distribution and begin to address problems like Staten Island's tolls and problems like other parts of the city that really don't have the type of service they need to sustain the folks who are living and working there.
Thank you, Speaker. Erik?
I agree that the mayor of the city of New York should have more control of the MTA. I also believe that if they're going to raise and keep raising, I live in Staten Island myself, in Westerly, and if they're going to continue raising the toll, they should raise it. I'm talking about the Verrazano Narrow. Let's raise it to $20. Let the rest of the people who live in New York City pay $10, and the people who live in Staten Island $5. That will make, people who are using our road, especially the 278, to think it twice to come through, because they threw in a lot of pollution into our city. And at the same time, any commercial vehicle that is delivering to Staten Island, they should pay also $5. And also, being that the Verrazano is subsidizing the mass transit, especially the train, we have to make sure that we don't focus on trying to extend the train to Secaucus. We have to make priority to extend the ARC train through the Verrazano to Staten Island, so we could connect all the New Yorkers that live in Staten Island with the rest of the city.
Thanks, Eric.
That's my plan.
Bill?
I think the legislation that was in Albany that was going to provide, I think, $14 million that would have helped to drive the cost down made sense. It was there to help to drive the cost down for residents as well as businesses, and I thought that made a lot of sense. In funding mass transit, as I talk about, ways to fund that and create additional dollars, that would also help to drive the tolls down, as well as increase transportation on Staten Island. Staten Island right now bears that unfair burden of having a huge toll, but also not having a mass transit structure that helps people get around without driving. So I think there are a number of ways that this can be done. I think it is that Staten Island is bear an unfair burden, and that there are ways to be able to drive those costs down, particularly when it comes to the Verrazano Bridge.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And last but not least, let's go to the New York City Bid Association. I don't know if Jennifer or Robert, one of you wants to ask the question.
I won the coin toss. Or lost. In getting ready for this forum, we solicited all 67 bids in the city in all 5 boroughs, and one consistent question that came up from our colleagues regarded vending. Right now, there's a patchwork of vending rules and regulations, laws, literally block by block, different rules apply. The food carts, food trucks, which are increasing presence, and general vending, put our brick and mortar stores at a competitive disadvantage. They're paying taxes, they're paying fees, they're paying rents, and yes, they're paying bid assessments that the temporary businesses out on the streets and sidewalks and curbs are not paying. So with that said, and we also have no official policy, we do not oppose vending, but what specific steps would you take to level the playing field, and are you willing to support legislation that would spell out a comprehensive plan that would regulate the location, type, and number of vendors, carts, and trucks, and rationalize vending in general?
Can we go ahead and start with the council speaker, because I've seen quite a few carts out there with your face on it. Sometimes they have little horns.
Never.
But why, and could we see more regulation of them?
I think when you look at the issue of vending, it's, as the question kind of implies, it's very complicated, right? Because these are also, they're different than brick and mortar businesses, but they're small businesses also, right? And they are a place where a lot of immigrants get started. And vendors have a fair point in the process, too, that they've been overly fined at times. And they also would agree that, with Rob, that the regulations around where they are supposed to be are not clear. There is no question, and we've taken some steps as a city, but we need to do more to make it very clear what the vendor regulations are and are not, particularly around enforcement. The question raises an interesting point. Should we have a citywide one standard for vending? I'm not sure. It sounds good because it would be clear and easy, but every block is different, every neighborhood is different, and what might work in Times Square might not work in Sunset Park or a different neighborhood. So I'm not sure we can come up in a way that really works for everybody with one size fits all. Now, I think there is no question the place we are in now is a little bit of a free-for-all, and there really isn't any sense. So we need to get to a place, what exactly that legislation would look like. We're going to have ongoing discussions and work, both with the bids, both with the chambers, and with the folks who represent vendors and the food trucks, because some of the food trucks are also offshoots of brick and mortar restaurants as well. So it's not just one side against the other. But I think the issue of getting to a place where we have a policy and standard or standards is absolutely where we have to go, because right now it's confusing, it's unclear, and there's times where just unfair situations of trucks opening up in front of businesses are happening. And Councilmember Garodnick and others have started this process with some hearings that began last week. So this is not going to be quick or easy because it's complicated, but the ball is rolling, and we welcome everyone's input.
Can we bounce over to Bill de Blasio, because you had your, and should we see one size fits all with these carts?
Yeah, I have a very different view than Speaker Quinn on this. The day I announced the report we had done showing the clear borough bias in fines and inspections towards bricks and mortar small businesses all over the city, Speaker Quinn was focused on the vendors. I respect the vendors, but let's face it, it's the wild, wild west out there. There is no plan. There has to be a plan. And in many cases, in the absence of a plan, the brick and mortar stores are being hurt. And I take the long view of this. These small businesses stood by their communities in good times and bad. I remember the bad times. I remember how much it was small businesses that sustained their communities even when we were facing real difficulties in terms of the economy, crime, et cetera. So we've got to make sure that we stop the incessant fines and attacks on stationary small businesses and come up with a common standard that I think vendors will appreciate too, because they'll know the rules of the game and they won't be subject to some of the unpredictable fines. But I must say, the employment engine, the neighborhood stability engine, the neighborhood character core is neighborhood small businesses, and I think we have to make sure first we are taking care of their needs.
All right, thanks, Bill. Sal?
I agree with Bill on this. The standard should be that vendors should not adversely impact brick and mortar business, particularly since they're paying taxes and dues for the bid, which is responsible for keeping our streets clean and what have you. So there's a place for vendors, but it's got to be transparent. It's got to be, it has to be objective, so everybody knows the rules. And we also have had a lot of conflicts between store owners and vendors, so it's not good for anyone. Let's get a clear pattern, and let's figure out how to do this objectively. Unfortunately, it reminds me of the property tax assessment system, totally discretionary. No one has a real idea. One house is assessed across the street from another significantly more than the other one. We need a Department of Finance that's going to be transparent when it comes to property taxes. Because transparency works. We have to do the same thing with vendors, so the brick and mortar businesses are not adversely impacted.
All right, thanks, Sal.
Yeah.
To the table, Billy?
I think that we do need a comprehensive plan. But the one thing, and understanding the nature of New York City, it can't be a one-size-fits-all approach. We do have to protect our brick and mortar businesses. They're the ones who are paying property taxes and so many other things. So we have to make sure we protect them. However, the one thing is we look at our vendors and vending trucks. Each neighborhood is different. So just to be able to say that, we're going to have one standard, I don't think that one standard fits every place in New York City. So it is going to have to be comprehensive. It is going to have to look at the differences in boroughs and neighborhoods as we make sure that we protect our brick and mortar businesses, but also to provide for the vendors. So I think it's going to be difficult, but it is something that has to be done, because right now it is, and the phrase was just used was the wild, wild west. It really is that out there. There is no standards. It varies from block to block, from truck to truck. We can't continue down the same path.
Okay, thank you. John?
Yeah, I think that it's tilted a little bit too much towards vendors and away from small business owners. And I think that a comprehensive citywide policy needs to, it does not necessarily mean that it's going to be one size fits all, but it needs to take a look at exactly where the vendors would be, the locations, the types of vendors. And because right now the vendors are really one of the biggest problems that are facing small business owners in the city of New York. Business owners who have fixed rents, who pay their taxes fully and also pick up sanitation fines when vendors are not necessarily cleaning up after themselves because there's no address to tag the vendors with. So the policy has to be changed in a way that even vendors can understand it better, and only then can we achieve a better balance between the vendors and the small business owners. But right now, there is way too much tension, and there's almost too much conflict in many neighborhoods. And also, I would add that in some neighborhoods, there just shouldn't be any vending at all, just because it becomes a safety hazard. There's just not enough space on the sidewalk where you start having people walk into the street. In those cases, we do have to go back to the days where there was zero tolerance and there was no vending along those particular streets.
Eric?
Yeah, we should have a standard plan for all the vendor in the city. We should have somebody appointed to all those vendors and make sure that they have a map of the city together with the big organization, and make sure that they are located in the area that they're not going to be affecting the people who are paying the rents. We know rents are too high in the city and too difficult sometimes to pay, and we also want to make sure that this vendor have the opportunity to also participate in our economic growth, but they have to be placed in places that make sense for the business owner.
Thank you. Because nobody liked my idea about directing questions, we're out of time. So I think we want to wrap this up at 10:30, correct, Carla? So remember the primary for the Democrats, September 10th. Runoff is September 24th, should we have a runoff. So good luck to everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Bye, John. See you later.